Previously, Keelan quickly sent his otter out to help keep Sean from drowning after she was unceremoniously dumped in the ocean when Taria crossed the membrane between planes. Moments later, Taria turned around and headed right back through the barrier, reappearing on the other side. They made their way back to the ship, and Taria described what she'd seen on the other side. It was definitely the same place that Tornak had described to them, but there hadn't been shadow spawn everywhere like he'd said there were. Also, the nearby sunken ship and their plane was on the surface there. There was some back and forth about whether or not they should explore some more. Taria thought it was a safe way of doing so, but Keelan pointed out that safe wasn't necessarily the word to use. They finally agreed to do some experimentation, with most of the group going to the other plane, while Keelan swam down to take a look at the shipwreck on their side of the membrane. Taria, Oz, and Zaya went up to the ship in the shadow plane and started making changes to it, which Keelan saw occur in the material plane as well. Any changes he made appeared in the shadow plane. Keelan then joined the others in the other plane. Sean and Taria's hands were still glowing, but they were glowing black instead of white. Everyone's appearance was slightly different as well, each of them having a slightly more dark look to them. The name of the ship they were studying was the Night Wind, and Tornak realized that he'd heard songs and stories about it. It was a legendary ghost ship that had been lost at sea long before magic had been banned, and people often told stories about it still sailing the ocean and trying to return home. They belonged to the Empire back when it was barely an empire. Around that point, Keelan realized that the Thalacrose pendant that had been buzzing slightly ever since they approached the atoll had stilled as soon as he crossed the membrane. Taria looked at it and told him that it didn't appear to be magical on that plane. He took it off and sat it down on the ground, stepping back to see if it tried to follow him like it had been ever since he'd picked it up. Nothing happened. Then a bell started to ring on the deck. The group climbed up onto the ship itself, where shadows were moving about the deck of the ship like echoes of people going about their jobs. "May we pierce the veil" was written on the bell. As it rang, though, it shifted to "We have gone too far." Everyone hesitated on the deck for a moment, trying to decide what to do. Taria suggested going below decks to see what was down there, and Keelan pointed out that this seemed like the moment of no return. If they were going to leave and return to their plane without risking any potential danger, they should probably do so. Spoiler, they didn't do so. Eventually, the group headed below decks, where they found an ornate locked door leading to the captain's quarters that they ignored for the time being. They found some weapons in another room, as well as a hidden door heading further down. In the bilges of the ship, there was an odd piece of shadowy machinery that was clearly damaged in some way. As Taria looked it over, she saw that there was something missing inside it. They decided to head back to the locked captain's quarters to try to get inside, and then they would head back to their plane to have Keelan explore the sunken ship to see if perhaps whatever was missing was still on that version of the ship. Tornak asked Sean to try to unlock the door to the captain's quarters with his help, since her hands were steadier. She did so, and a trap was set off. That instantly killed her. She dropped to the floor, the glow around her hands disappearing in a blink. Keelan grabbed her body and started sprinting upwards, intending to rush for the barrier that led back to the other plane. Taria shouted at Keelan that he needed to bring out the karma from its bottle, but he ignored her for the time being. As he came up onto the deck, Keelan saw a flash near where the pendant of Thalacrose that he'd left on the ground still was. A loud voice echoed around them. "The veil weakens. Mortal blood spills by mortal hands. The herald comes. The shadow rises to meet the light and overcome it." Which, seemed like a good thing, right? The shadows on the ship moved to attack, while in the distance a black ship came closer and closer. And that is where we left off.